Alright, mathematicians, so this lesson is on operations with rational numbers. So rational numbers are a number that can be represented by a fraction of two integers. So like 3/4 or 4/6 or negative 2/3. Irrational numbers are a different set of numbers. Those are like pi and the square root of 2, numbers that don't have an exact decimal that we can put it to. Like with pi, we can get really close, 3.14159. Maybe you can go longer, but there's no exact fraction that works for pi, so we call it irrational. But there are operations we can do with both sets of numbers. When you get into 8th grade math, you'll do some work with irrational numbers. For 7th grade, we're going to do operations with rational numbers. So this is with working with fractions. So you may have already seen this might be review for you, but we're going to go over it anyway, because fractions seem to give students the most difficult problems. And I want to show you perhaps a simpler way or just something in your book that you can refer to. So I'm actually going to take it all the way back to talking about the greatest common factors and the least common multiples. And then we'll go on to adding and subtracting fractions and then multiplying and dividing. For this first part here, this first video, you should have in this packet these 3 pieces of paper. Okay, this one is an on your own, that's going to go on the left side, and then these both kind of go together. So what you're going to do is you're going to first cut this out. Okay, cut that out, and then on that line as well, and we're going to fold it, and it's actually going to end up being glued on here. And this paper you're going to cut out, okay, and then that's going to be put onto your book. So really the notes are going to be on these pieces of paper, and then it's going to be glued into your book. So you can go ahead and start cutting these out now and pause the video. All right, now that you have all of those cut out and this piece cut out here, what you're going to do is take this and fold it in half. As perfect as you can. Okay, and you're gonna unfold that and cut it just between the middle so we can open these flaps up, not all the way, and we can put some glue on the back here. So that this gets glued right here. All right, and now we can fold these up, and we're going to write in there, and we're going to talk about least common multiple versus greatest common factor. Okay, so we're going to start with something just a little bit different. We're going to start with an I can statement here. So I can find the least common multiple and greatest common factor given 2 numbers. So find the least common multiple and greatest common factor between 2 numbers. Okay, and let's talk about each because they are very different and a lot of students get them confused. Okay, the least common multiple. So that is the smallest, and let's do that in a different color. Why don't we do that one in, I'll do that one in green. This is the smallest, I'm going to underline smallest, okay, common multiple that is divisible by both numbers. Okay, so that is the least common multiple. And I'll choose purple to do the greatest common factor. So the greatest common factor is the greatest, right, or largest common factor that is divisible by both numbers. And so you might be asking yourself, well, what is the point? Why does it really matter? It's good to know the difference because, it's good to know the difference because the GCF is looking at the common factor while the LCM is looking at the common multiples. And when you do things like factoring in 8th grade, and we're going to get a little bit into that in Unit 2, we're actually looking for the GCF. When we do things like add fractions, we're looking at the LCM. Okay, so those are the two differences, and it's really easy to confuse them because even look at their definitions, right? Everything's kind of the same except for smallest and greatest. So it can be kind of confusing. So the difference between LCM and GCF is that GCF is looking at common factors Factors are numbers you multiply to get to a number. So if we're looking at the number 6, a common factor of 6 would be like 3 and 2 because 3 times 2 are both 6. So GCF is looking at common factors while the LCM is looking at common multiples. Okay, and we'll do a little bit of color coding here. So GCF, I did purple, and I'll make that purple here. LCM, I did green, so I'm gonna make that green here. Now you don't have to use the same colors that I do, but I do want you to color code them so that they match. Okay, so now let's do this. Let's look at number 1 for our examples. Least common multiple of 6 and 8. So how you find this is you list out the multiples of 6. So you say 6 is, well, there's 6, and then 12. So I'm just adding 6 each time. It's another multiple of 6. So this is like 6 times 1, 6 times 2 is 12, 6 times 3 is 18, 6 times 4 is 24. Right, I can keep going. 36, I could keep going. And you want to do the same thing for 8. So 8 would be 8, and then 8 plus 8, or 8 times 2 would be 16, and then 24, and then 32, and you can keep going, but we want to stop because they have a number that's in common now, right? The common multiple, their smallest one, is 24. Okay, so it's important to note that when you look at the least common multiple, it's never going to be smaller than either of these numbers. right? Because these just keep getting bigger. Okay, and it could be equal to that number, like these can both be 8s or both be 6s, but it's not going to be smaller than 6 or 8. It's going to be bigger. Okay, so in this case, they both have 24 in common. Okay, so we're going to write that. They both have 24 in common. So the LCM is 24. And now let's do the greatest common factor. So greatest common factor of 2 and 8 is when you take two numbers and you break them down into numbers that when you multiply them together, you get 2 or you get 8, and we do those separately. So like 2, we can break that down into 2 times 1. And there's no really other way to break that down. So 2, the greatest common factors are 2 and 1. And we'll do the same thing for 8. So 8, if I break that down, I can get 8 and 1, right? 8 times 1. This could be 4 times 2. And this could be 2 times 2. So the greatest common factors for 8 are, let's see all the numbers that I have here. I've got a 1, I've got a 2, I've got a 4, and I've got an 8. So there are 4 numbers there that go in 8. And so when you're looking for the greatest common factor, the greatest one they have in common is going to be 2. So they both have 2 in common. So the GCF is equal to 2. So in this one, you're looking for the greatest number, and this one, you're looking for the smallest number. But in both instances, you're listing out the numbers. At this point, you're going to follow directions to do these problems on the left side. So we've got some problems here that have GCF and LCM. And it says, on a rating of 1 through 5, how comfortable are you with this concept? 5 is the highest. So I want you to mark this so your teacher knows how comfortable you are with this. And for these problems, you're going to do the same thing I did in these two examples, is find the greatest common factor between these two numbers, and then the least common multiple between the two numbers, okay? And the ones they have in common go in the middle. So this is like a Venn diagram. Okay, so that's what you're going to work on, and then show your teacher when you're done so that they can review it and know that you're ready to move on.